York, and I have been somebody who, I'll just be clear, grew up a Knicks fan, but I've been sort of staying away from this conversation, because I think the conversation can get to be a little bit ridiculous, to be honest. But there's been a whole back and forth between Knicks and Nets fans. We know the Nets have championship aspirations with the Big Three. Knicks fans I still think the Big 15 name is corny. I don't like that. I think it's whack. No, don't call yourself the Big 15. We don't need to do that.
Who's called himself the Big 15?
The Knicks did. Like, so this was you don't remember this, Brian? They had this was before a game against the Nets, I believe, and he said, "Oh, how do you think you guys are going to match with this Big Three?"
Wasn't
Julius
it like
Randle and Reggie Bullock. I think it was Reggie Bullock who had it. He was like, "Oh, we're not the Big Three. We got the Big 15." And I was like, "Okay, I'm not really fond of that name." But there's been this back and forth between the fan bases. Who runs New York? Who's more important to New York? Who's bigger in New York? Who's more relevant? All this stuff that doesn't matter. And I was talking with a Nets fan the other day, actually right before Game 1, the Nets played the Celtics. And I ended up talking to some other Nets fans outside Barclays Center about this. And, they were kind of saying, like, agreeing with it. Like, it doesn't really matter. And, we should be one New York. I'm a Knicks fan who doesn't want to see, I'm not rooting for the Nets. I don't really pay too much attention or care that way, but I don't root for them to do badly or not needling their fans. Do you think that this back and forth between the fan bases, do you think it matters? Should people care? Does it mean something in the grand scheme of things? Is one team more relevant than the other? What do you think? Because Brian told me a theory that I think has some social and cultural relevance to it. I think it's kind of interesting, and I will support the parts of it that I think make a lot of sense when you think about it in terms of New York history. But Brian, share with the people what you think matters about this.
I think a lot of New Yorkers resent the Brooklyn Nets fans and the organization to a certain degree because it just sort of stems with the other problems that we're experiencing in New York as a city. Like when you're seeing gentrification, when you're seeing like the city changing, like that's sort of, I think, what the Nets symbolize to them. Because the Nets came from Jersey, and a lot of places are coming from other locations and building offices here, and a lot of them are going to Brooklyn. And Brooklyn is, well, one time, we remember when gentrification was starting, people couldn't afford to live in Manhattan, they were moving to Brooklyn. And a lot of places in Brooklyn are now priced out or pricing out other people, whatever. And people got to move from Brooklyn to outside of New York City, et cetera, et cetera. And it sort of represents inflation in that way. A lot of New Yorkers who are born and raised here, because the Nets don't have that sort of institution yet. That's going to be, a long time from now if they get there, because they're rooted in New Jersey and previously they were in Long Island. So they don't have like the New Yorkers in the same way that the Knicks do, obviously, because the Knicks are born and raised here and have been here for, however many years. And these New Yorkers who have grown up here, like they were Knicks fans. I think it was Bomani Jones, Dexter, we were just talking about this, where he said that sort of, or I think it was Julio that said it in our podcast, where we had him on a couple months ago, where he was like, yo, like the Knicks fan base is filled with, a lot of people from all these different cultures. Like you go to a Knicks game, there's Puerto Ricans, there's Dominicans, there's Black people from all different locations and things of that nature. There's Jewish people, Greek, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what New York City is supposed to be. And the Nets haven't necessarily gotten there yet. And I think people associate that with, to some degree, gentrification. There's an inside joke amongst some people on social media that call the Nets the Williamsburg Nets because of this kind of thing. They're at Barclays Center. And Dexter, you covered this. Like you remember at Barclays Center when it was being built here, the things that were being said. You know what I mean? And them just sort of moving all these people out and the businesses. Like you can talk a little bit about that because you were really around that when that was going on. But I think this is sort of all tied into how this sort of perception is. And when you think about like the business example, the Nets come in, they're just the right team at the right time. They have Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and they end up getting James Harden. And it's the same thing as like this is this shiny new office, whatever, and we have all these different quote unquote assets. I don't call players assets, but some people do. But it's all sort of tied in. Like business, like big business comes here into the city. and they're pushing people out. And this is what sort of happens with, Kevin Durant coming here, Kyrie Irving coming here, James Harden coming here. I think this is the perception of them because Knicks fans are accusing them of buying a championship, whereas they're sort of doing it now or trying to do it now from the ground up, even though they try to do it the same way and just weren't ready at the time. So I think there's a level of symbolism into that because I'm looking at the New York Post also. If you notice, they have this their playoff column, and on the back cover they have the Knicks and the Nets. And in boxing, I watch MMA. The A side team or person, the A side competitor is always on the right side, your left. That's where the Knicks were on the newspaper. The Nets were on the other side. The Empire State Building, the day before the Knicks were playing their first playoff game, and I think the same day the Nets were playing their first playoff game, they weren't black and white. The colors were blue and orange. You could say that's because they were in Manhattan, but also like they just have that institution built in New York City. I think all these things are sort of connected when you look at it.
No, I think there is. The one thing I'll say is, the Knicks fans who've been coming at the Nets for buying the championship, I don't rock with that because there's many different ways.
I'm not saying I rock with any of this, by the way.
Yeah.
This is just what I've gathered.
If the Knicks, you got to give credit to the Nets for what they've done the last couple of years in building up players and their value and being able to flip them and get these 2 stars through free agency and being able to trade for James Harden. Look, if the Knicks,
but here's the thing.
That's fine.
Let me ask you this though: if they were to do this in Orlando, I don't think the impact would be any less. It just happened that the Nets were the right team at the right time.
But I will say this. I also don't think they would be able to do that in Orlando, just like I don't think the Nets would have been able to do it if they were in New Jersey. Right?
Yeah.
The location of them being in Brooklyn, and I could be a biased Brooklynite.
Oh, no. You're right about the location. I'm just saying about like the team itself is not why they got there. Right, like they didn't go to become Brooklyn Nets. They have a different sort of thing. Like they were the right team at the right time. They didn't go to be Brooklyn. The Nets are still ascending in that way.
I think they were the right team at the right time in the right location. I think all that stuff matters, right? Like for them to do it. I think more than now, like I do think sometimes market can be overrated if you haven't won. I do think people are looking for culture, where they can fit, where they can build their brand, where there are marketing opportunities. I think all that stuff matters for players now. And if it so happens to be in a big market, that's going to elevate it higher. That doesn't mean market doesn't matter at all. It's not like people are running to go play in Milwaukee. It's not like people are running to go play in Sacramento. We know that's not true. So being in the number one media market, having competency, which is what the Nets had shown over the last couple of years, matters. Now the Knicks are starting to show, although in a smaller sample size, they're starting to show some competency, and the future could be bright for them as well. So I think all that stuff matters. So it's interesting. I don't think the fan bases have to pin one against the other. I see some stuff from the net side where it's a little bit of little brother, big brother. I think in New York, we see this here with the Yankees, Mets, the Jets, Giants. In LA, they probably see with the Clippers or the Dodgers and the Angels. You see that kind of stuff too. The team that doesn't necessarily get talked about as much, the team that's a little brother, those fan bases tend to feel a little inferior. And I can say this as somebody who grew up a Mets fan, the inferior baseball team in town, a Jets fan when I used to do that, the inferior football team in town. You can see within the fan bases they have a complex. They're always trying to prove themselves. Like, we when we're coming up, we're try to smash out the team. It's like, you don't have to do that. Just focus on you. I wish both fan bases would just focus on themselves. Like, I don't necessarily sit and worry about what one other team is doing. Just focus on your team, put your energy into your team. Some of the back and forth and stuff we see is going on Twitter. I mean, I guess it's fun if you're in a series, if you're actually playing against each other, but, trying to understand who's the king of New York or all this other stuff, it's just kind of like, whatever. What'll change perceptions and stuff for the Nets? Winning. That's what'll change for them. If they win, it'll change. Or maybe not.
Maybe not. Like, right. That's the thing I was going to say.
Maybe it doesn't matter as much because they haven't done it here. I think you can't have it both ways. And this is maybe you'll make this point for you, B. A lot of people always said, well, if player X comes and wins a championship for the Knicks and ends the drought, it means something. I think the reason you see such a high level of energy from Knicks fans, we talked about it earlier in Game 1 and other stuff, is it means something that they've done this in this way, that Tibbs has led them back to it, that they're competent, they're not the butt of anybody's jokes. And we saw how people in the media tried to, dismiss their efforts this year. Oh, the defense isn't real. Until now, you see all the experts saying the defense is real. Right. I think that it does, matter for the reasons Brian said. And we had talked about this with Julio. And I did also hear Bomani Jones make this point. Yes, the diversity towards the Knicks. Basketball is, I know a lot of people say it's a baseball town, but basketball is really the passion sport of mainly immigrants in New York City. And that's why there's such a diverse fan base among the Knicks. There's so many immigrants that picked up and played the sport, that love basketball. If you come from other countries, like Brian and I, our parents have, that love basketball here and then ended up loving the Knicks so much. And I think that's why they're more into, I don't want to call them true New Yorkers. I don't really want to say that. But the long, tried and true New Yorkers that have a history here, their history is also going to be with the Knicks. Again, that doesn't mean it can't change for the Nets. I think it will. But like Brian made the point, it's going to take generations for that to happen. I watched back in 2006 when he started doing the groundbreaking on Barclays. I was there the first night that the Barclays Center opened. I was there for one of the first Jay-Z concerts. I've seen everything that's happened around the Barclays Center, how gentrification has changed the neighborhoods in Fort Greene and Park Slope and, Prospect Heights around there, how certain businesses have been pushed out, how they promised more affordable housing and never did it, how they promised more jobs and they never did it, which happens to a lot of people, that affects a lot of people in that. So I understand the view Brian's saying and the things that come up about why this is looked at as the gentrification team is sort of emblematic of what has happened in Brooklyn. I can see that, and I can see why the deep-rooted New Yorkers that are Knicks fans look at that and they're like, get that out of here. This is just more nonsense of what we see going on around it. Now, that's no shade to the Nets and their fans, but it's going to take generations for, I think, their fan base rooted in Brooklyn. A lot of kids growing up in Brooklyn, like myself, who love basketball, we're Knicks fans. We grew up Knicks fans. You know what I mean? It's going to take 3-4 generations of people probably seeing like my daughter's kids, if they grow up from Brooklyn, to actually see where there's more Nets fans. I think it's growing. The Nets brand is way stronger than it was 20 years ago. Absolutely, just by them coming to Brooklyn. But there's still a ways to go. But I think all this stuff doesn't matter. But I'll tell you what I want to see? Especially the way things have gone for both teams this year. I'd love to see a Subway Series. Yeah. I'd love to see them play in the playoffs. I can't wait for that. That'll be so much fun.
I think the other thing about this too is that, a couple things. One, what doesn't really work in their favor long term is that a lot of people just watching basketball now, like I feel like a lot of kids coming up are not necessarily fans of teams in the same way that your generation and later on my generation was. Like my generation growing up, we were still fans of, like, I'm still a Mets fan. Like I was a Jet fan at some point. You know what I mean? I think that growing up, kids are identifying more with different players. And you're seeing that with Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, James Harden, where there's a survey that came out that said who's the most hated team or whatever. Coincidentally, in New York, the most hated team was actually the Philadelphia 76ers, which I think is actually Knicks fans and Nets fans put together being like, fuck the Sixers. But the Nets were the most hated team in a lot of places. And I think that has very little to do with the Nets as an institution and more to do with they have Kevin Durant, they have Kyrie Irving, they have James Harden. They're the super team of right now. Very few teams could be that institution and be hated in that same way. Like if the Knicks were to get better than this, then yes, you're going to start seeing them pop up on more of those lists. The Lakers, because they have LeBron James, because they have Anthony Davis, and the Lakers are championship contenders, they're going to be up there. If the Celtics were able to get their shit together and be very good again, they're going to be up there. Like those are sort of the institutional brands. If Miami, because they're like a glamorous city, if they were to become really good, if they were to carry over what they did last year into this year, maybe you start to see them resonate in that way. The Nets still have to build that, obviously, because they're still in their very, very early Brooklyn days. Like it hasn't even been 10 years since they started playing Brooklyn Nets basketball. So there's obviously a pathway to all this happening, but I think the level of resentment that some Knicks fans have for them and hatred towards them is also projected on like what's going on in the city in general. So I kind of feel for them in that way. And, we'll see what's going, like one of the things that I'm really curious about is whether or not the Nets actually win this championship. But beyond that, what happens if they do, right? Like what happens if they actually get this done this year? Will there just be a collective eye roll? What will be sort of the reaction? Because I feel like we're at a point where when super teams win, we kind of just are like, whatever. You know, like Kevin Durant didn't quite get the respect that he thought he would after winning those 2 with Golden State. And I think that he might be in for a similar sort of thing here, unfortunately for him, if he were to win this time around, fair or not. So I'm curious to see like what's going to be the sort of fallout here now, because I remember listening to, I think it was David Jacoby recently on Bill Simmons' podcast, and he was saying Julius Randle is the biggest star in New York right now. And look, say what you want, there's a lot of people who seem to feel that way, even with Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden here in the city.